Welcome to today's Explainer. For over a century, our understanding of human history has been boxed in by a really specific and honestly pretty rigid set of assumptions. And a lot of those were drawn up by Victorian-era archaeologists who were basically just projecting their own social norms right onto the ancient dirt. For decades, we've been fed this story where ancient men were the hunters, the brave warriors, the sole architects of power, right? While women were supposedly relegated strictly to the sidelines, gathering berries and managing the home. But what happens when cutting-edge modern science looks at the exact same ancient bones and tells a completely different story? Today, we're exploring how revolutionary new archaeological methods are literally rewriting everything we thought we knew about ancient women. We're unearthing a biological past that is so much more complex and, frankly, so much more fascinating than the grade school history books ever told us. Okay, let's dive into this and pose the core mystery of today's discussion. What if the towering figures of antiquity, the supreme rulers wielding ivory daggers, or the fearsome Vikings buried with arsenals of weapons, weren't actually the men that 19th and 20th century experts assumed they were? What if the historical lens we've been looking through was fundamentally blurred by our own modern biases? For years, textbooks completely celebrated the Ivory Man of Spain. Discovered near Seville, this 5,000-year-old skeleton was buried with an actual elephant tusk, crystal daggers, exquisite pottery, the whole shebang. So naturally, he was hailed as the supreme leader of the Iberian Peninsula. And it was a similar story in Sweden. The Burka male warrior, found in grave BJ 581, was universally considered the ultimate 10th century Viking fighter, buried with swords, shields, armor-piercing arrows, and even 2 sacrificed horses. But here is the shocking reality. Recent scientific analysis has proven, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that both of these incredible individuals were, in fact, women. No way, right? But it's true. The supreme Iberian leader is now officially the Ivory Lady, and that ultimate Viking, she's the Burka female warrior. Section 1. New Science Changing History. Unlocking the Biological Past. So how exactly did we get this so wrong for so long? Well, the answer lies in replacing all that assumption-based guesswork with a modern archaeological detective's toolkit. Traditional archaeology relied heavily on biased visual cues. Like if a skeleton was buried with a sword, researchers automatically assumed, yep, that's a man. If it was buried with jewelry, must be a woman. But today's toolkit doesn't rely on guesswork at all. We now use ancient DNA, or aDNA analysis, and when the DNA is too degraded to read, scientists use peptide analysis, which is basically examining the proteins trapped in tooth enamel to definitively determine biological sex. Add in isotope analysis, which literally tells us exactly what these people ate and where they migrated from, and we are now biologically proving who these individuals actually were. It's an absolute game changer. So, the crucial point is, we absolutely must understand the difference between biological sex and social gender identity. The hard science we just discussed determines biological sex, the physical and physiological characteristics of an individual. But social gender identity, that's about the roles and attributes a specific society assigns to its people. And what these new discoveries are showing us is that ancient societies simply did not restrict women's social roles in the way we do in modern history. The biological women we're unearthing possessed social gender identities that allowed them to be supreme leaders, shamans, and elite, heavily armed warriors. Section 2. Warrior and Hunter Women. Shattering the man-the-hunter myth. It is definitely time to completely step away from that outdated 1960s textbook theory of man the hunter and woman the gatherer. Just look at the staggering statistic, 41%. A recent study analyzing early graves across the Americas estimates that up to 41% of big game hunters were actually female. That's a massive portion of the population. This revelation was heavily inspired by the Willamaya Pachec Joxa discovery up in the highlands of Peru. There, archaeologists found the remains of a 17 to 19-year-old woman buried surrounded by heavy hunting weapons specifically designed to take down massive mammals. She wasn't just foraging for berries, she was actively out there hunting big game. And how exactly did she do it? She used a tool called an atlat. The process involves 3 key steps. First, you attach a sharp stone point to a dart. Second, you load that dart into a spear thrower. And third, you fling it with immense velocity. Prehistoric women used these exact tools to hunt large animals, proving that physical endurance, skill, and the strategic intelligence required for hunting were absolutely not exclusively male domains. Women had the metabolic endurance and the technological savvy to be true apex predators. And this brilliantly illustrates how this reality extended right onto the battlefield as well. For centuries, the mythical Greek Amazons were thought to be purely fictional, just stories. But in graves like Davica V in Russia, dating all the way back to the 4th century BCE, archaeologists have found multiple generations of Scythian and Sarmatian women buried together in writing positions. They were surrounded by iron arrows, spears, and one was even wearing a golden crown. The science confirms it. The legendary Amazons were entirely real, and they were formidable, crown-wearing warriors ruling the steppes.
We see this exact same bias being corrected over in Britain, too. Back in 1999 on the Scilly Isles, archaeologists found an Iron Age grave containing both a sword and a mirror. And this completely baffled the experts. To them, a sword meant male, but a mirror definitely meant female. For literally over 2 decades, they scratched their heads, unable to agree on who was actually in the grave. Finally, advanced tooth enamel peptide analysis provided the undeniable truth. She was a biological female. She was an elite, high-status fighter who actively participated in warfare. It's amazing how much a single scientific test can clear up.
Section 3. Types of Power and Leadership. Beyond the Battlefield. But physical combat and hunting are really just one piece of the puzzle here. Power isn't always wielded with a sword. Consider this massive number, 270,000. That is the number of marine shell beads found in the incredible Montelario tomb in Spain, dating back 5,000 years. Inside this tomb were 20 individuals, and 15 of them were women. The sheer volume of these beads, which were meticulously crafted into ornate garments, showcases an extraordinary level of organized labor and extreme social prestige. These female leaders commanded vast resources and immense respect in their society. Much of this influence really ties back to how these societies were structured from the ground up. While many modern societies are patrilocal, meaning you live at the father's kin, many ancient societies were actually matrilocal. In a matrilocal system, families live with the mother's kin after marriage, and this naturally elevates female influence. We see clear evidence of this in the 9,000-year-old egalitarian settlement of Çatalhöyük in Turkey and among the fierce Iron Age Dorotries tribe in Britain, where women clearly enjoyed much higher social participation and commanded deep respect. Let's move to the global stage and see how this builds across a truly massive footprint. We see an incredible variety of roles across totally different continents and eras, from the heavily tattooed Siberian ice maiden in the Altai Mountains, who acted as a highly revered spiritual leader or shaman, to the Paleolithic Lady of Cavione in Italy, who was buried with a spectacular shell headdress, all the way to Fu Hao of Shang Dynasty China, who was both a brilliant military commander and a total master of political influence. Women held central structural roles in civilizations quite literally all over the globe. And we really must recognize the immense structural reality of soft power. Women like Fu Hao or the royal wives of Zimri Lim in ancient Syria didn't always need to be solitary autocrats to rule effectively. They exercised intense political soft power. They influenced vital policy, served as the essential connective tissue between rival factions, and patronized important clients. This form of leadership is just as real, just as historical, and just as deeply impactful as holding a sword or occupying a throne. Section 4. Reevaluating Gender Identity. Erasing the Patriarchy Origin Myth. As we prepare to wrap up here, we have to address the overarching academic myth that this new science completely dismantles. For over a century, thinkers like Friedrich Engels argued that the invention of agriculture basically instantly and permanently created the patriarchy. But actually, scratch that. It wasn't that simple. As Dr. Rachel Pope so aptly puts it, there is no single idea of womanhood or manhood. There is a real diversity of social rules and norms. Agriculture didn't just instantly erase female power. Across different eras, societies fluctuated, adapted, and constructed highly diverse rules regarding gender and authority. Which brings us to a final, absolutely vital thought from Penny Bickle. Social gender identity is not stable, but goes through continuous change. Now, what's really interesting here is how it forces us to rethink everything. The past wasn't just some primitive rehearsal for modern patriarchy. It was a vibrant, wildly complex tapestry where women hunted mammoths, commanded armies, wielded immense political soft power, and ruled as spiritual and societal leaders. By looking at the hard biological science rather than relying on our own modern biases, we are finally unearthing the true dynamic history of humanity. It really makes you wonder, if we've been this wrong about something this fundamental for so long, what other massive historical truths are just waiting out there in the ground to be discovered?